Where are we? What daf are we up to? Oh, gewaldig. Alright, what do you want me to tell you? How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tezvav, Daf 15 of Masechta Kiddushin. Friends. I guess we kind of continue with, yesterday we, at the end of the daf, we're trying to figure out, right, there's a machlokas, sochir, right, that it says sochir by a Eved Ivri that sold himself, and it says sochir by an Eved Ivri that was sold by Bezdin. And because of the Gzeir Shav of sochir, so you can learn out the halachos of, one from the other, right, Eved Ivri who sells himself, and Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin. Now, there was an opinion that does not learn out this Gezeir Shavim. We're trying to figure out which opinion is that. We tried to bring it from a machlokas in a brisa yesterday, but that didn't really work out. So now we're going to try some other options. I think it might not. I don't. Who is the? I can't remember. Did we actually figure out who it is? I don't know. I can't remember. But in the meantime, we're going to continue with that. So we did a whole chunk yesterday on Daf Tezvav Mud Aleph, so that's good. And that was like a mess of a chunk. So we're going to start about 10 lines before it gets wide on Tezvav Mud Aleph. So really we're about about 3/5 of the way through the page. I'm not going to count all the lines and divide and to prove that I'm right, but let's just say we're about 3/5 of the way down the page. And okay, so the Gemara says, the middle of the line, it says Ela man tana delo yolif sochir. Got it? Again, about 10 lines before it gets wide. About 3/5 or about 60% down the daf. So then who's the Tana who does not learn the Gzeir Shava of sochir? Hi Tanu. It's the following Tana. The Tanya is within a brayse v'shav el mishpachto v'gomer, that the pasuk says regarding the Jubilee year that he will go back to his family during the Jubilee year. Omer Eliezer ben Yaakov b'omei akosu medaber. Now says Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov, who goes back to his family during the Jubilee year? What is the pasuk talking about? If we're talking about an Eved Ivri who sells himself, harei kvar omur. That was already stated. Rashi points out that, right, it says Ad shnasa yovel yavod imcha. So yavod imach, probably, that he works with you until the Jubilee year. No, is it imach? Yeah. So until the Jubilee year, he works with you. So we already have a pasuk regarding the Eved Ivri who sells himself. Ibn Yirtza, and if we're talking about a doorman, harei kvar amur, we also have a pasuk regarding the doorman already, that he goes free during at the Jubilee year, and the Gemara is going to explain shortly what that verse is. Ha in akasu medaber elo bimcharu bezdin. Rather, the pasuk over here that it says that he goes back home during the Jubilee year is talking about an Eved Ivri who was sold by Bezdin. Shtayim v'shalosh shanim lifnei Yovel, 2 or 3 years before Yovel. Yovel motzio, that comes the Jubilee year and sends him home, right? So he was only an Eved Ivri, so the Bezdin sold him a yepis, stole epis, and he didn't have money to pay it back. Bezdin sold him as an Eved Ivri, and then normally an Eved Ivri is for 6 years. In this case, after 2 or 3 years already, the Jubilee year comes and ends his servitude, and he goes home. Yalif sochir. Now, if it would enter your mind that this Tana holds of the Gzeir Shaveh of sochir, lama li, then why do I need this pasuk to teach me that an Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin goes home, goes free at the Jubilee year? Nelev sochir. Why don't we just learn a Gzeir Shaveh from an Eved Ivri who sells himself, right? We said that we had a verse that teaches that an Eved Ivri who sells himself goes free at the Jubilee year, even before 6 years. And if we hold the Gzeir Shavah of sochir, so I should know that an Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin, oichit, would go free at the Jubilee year. So rather, it must be that this Tana does not hold of the Gzeir Shavah, and therefore, that is why we need this pasuk to teach us that an Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin goes free at the Jubilee year. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak L'olam Yolav Sachir Sachir. Says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, actually, I will explain that this Tana does hold of the Gzeir Shava of Sachir Sachir. Well, if that's the case, then if we know that an Eved Ivri who sells himself goes free at the Jubilee year, then don't I also know then that an Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin goes free at the Jubilee year from the Gzeir Shava? Not necessarily. I still needed a pasuk to teach me that an Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin goes free at the Jubilee year. If you're wondering if I'm just like to say Jubilee year, I do. Sakadaite chamina mocher atzmo hu delo avad isura. I may have thought that, look, an Eved Ivri who sells himself goes free at the Jubilee year because, look, at the end of the day, he didn't steal, he didn't do anything nice, he was destitute. Unfortunately, he felt that the way forward was for him to sell himself as an Eved Ivri. But he didn't, he didn't become an Eved Ivri because he stole and he didn't have money to pay back, and now Bezdin, the court, sold him into servitude. No, he just, he needed to find whatever it was. He decided that he was going to sell himself as an Eved Ivri. 2-3 years after having sold himself, it's the Jubilee year. He goes free. But I might think that if a fellow is sold by Bezdin because he stole and he can't afford to pay it back, the Avad Yisura that he did an Isser, right? He's a ganif. So Ema Niknese. So I might think that we should fine him. And even when the Jubilee year comes, he must, continue his servitude until 6 years are up. Kamash Malon. Therefore, we have that pasuk to say, don't say that, and rather, an Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin as well would go free at the Jubilee year. Okay, fine. Right, but then Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin goes free at the Jubilee year. Amar Mai, we said a few lines earlier, we said that, well, we already have a pasuk to teach me that a doorman goes free at the Jubilee year. Maihi, what is this pasuk? Titanis, we learn in a brayso, v'shav tami shelach uzaso ve'ish el mishpachto tashuvu v'gemer. That the pasuk says that a fellow goes back to his land and his family. Who are we talking about in this pasuk? If it's talking about a fellow who sells himself, so we said we have a pasuk for that already, that he goes free at the Jubilee year. Now we just quoted another pasuk that teaches that an Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin Oichit goes free at the Jubilee year. Rather, the pasuk is talking about a doorman. It's talking about a fellow who was already an Eved Ivri for 6 years. At the end of the 6 years, he says, you know what, I want to continue being an Eved Ivri. And he said, Shtayim, so they nail him to the door. And then Shtayim v'shalosh shanim lifnei Yovel. If this happens 2 or 3 years before the Jubilee year, Shayovel motzio, the Jubilee year frees him. Right? So he, after 6 years, he says, you know what, I want to continue being an Eved Ivri. They nail him to the door, and then by the year, they nail his ear into the door. And then if 2 years later comes the Jubilee year, he goes free. So my mashma. So how do we know that this pasuk teaches this? Amarava b'ashilo amakra ish. Well, the pasuk says ish. Ezu davar shenoig beish ve'noig beisha. Right? The pasuk says v'shavtim ish alachuzaso. So who's this ish who goes home? Well, what's something that applies specifically to a man, not to a woman? Haveomer zoritzia. This is talking about a doorman. There's no such thing as door women. It's doormen, right? That if an Eved Ivri wants to continue being an Eved for more than 6 years, he can become a doorman. An Amo Ivriya does not become a door woman. Okay, so that's how we know that the pasuk is saying that a doorman goes free at the Jubilee year. Now, the pasuk needed to teach us that both an Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin as well as a doorman, that in both cases they go free at the Jubilee year. Because if we only had the context, right, of it, if we only had an Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin, and we're saying that comes the Jubilee year and he goes free, Mishum Dilo Matoi Zimne. So I need, so I could say, look, the reason why you have an Eved Ivri who's sold by Bezdin, he's been an Eved Ivri now for 2 years. Comes the Jubilee year, he goes free. He goes free because his term has not ended yet. Let's go weiter for a second. It'll become clear in a second. Aval Nirtza, but a doorman, Dimatoi Zimne, who his 6 years were already up, and he voluntarily said, I want to be a doorman, I want to continue being an Eved Ivri, Ema Niknase. I might say that we should find him and say that he doesn't go free. Meaning, right, as Rashi points out, why are we finding him? Because the Pasuk says, Avodayhem, that the Yidden are the Avodim to the Eibishter. And now you have this fellow who says, no, I want to be an Eved to another fellow. So therefore, and that's not a good thing, right? You want to be, right, the Eibishter says that these are, right, that we're Avodim to the Eibishter, not Avodim to other people. And this guy says, I want to be an Eved to another fellow. My neighbors are still here. I thought they were going home. I thought they were going home from the day they got here. Maybe they're not going home. What should we do? I don't know. Alright. Anyways, so if we only had the pasuk to teach me that an Eved Ivri was sold by Bezdin, if we only had a pasuk to say, Yanki Lazar, if we only had a pasuk to say that an Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin, comes the Jubilee year, 2 years later, he goes free. I might think because, okay, he can go free after 2 years. It's not like he did something so audacious as to, audacious, I think. So audacious as to voluntarily, after 6 years, say, you know what? I want to voluntarily continue being an Eved Ivri, even though the Eibishter says, Avodayhem, that the Yidden are my Avodim, not Avodim to other people. But I might think that a doorman who voluntarily says, no, I want to be an Eved to another fellow, not to the Eibishter, or like not directly to the Eibishter, so maybe we should find him and say that he doesn't go free during the Jubilee year. So therefore we need a pasuk to say that even a doorman goes free at the Jubilee year. V'yashmina nirtza, if we would only have the pasuk by the doorman, mishum de'avad lei sheish. That is because he already did 6 years. He already did a term, right? If we only have the pasuk of the doorman, well, the doorman already did his 6 year avdus, so now comes the Jubilee year, he can go free. Hav'mecharu Bezdin, but when he's sold by Bezdin, and 2 years later comes the Jubilee year, to lo avad leisheish, that he never did a full term of 6 years, emalo, I might say that he doesn't go free at the Jubilee year tzricha. Therefore, we need a pasuk both by Mecharu Bezdin as well as a doorman, that in both cases comes the Jubilee year, and they go free. And we need the pasuk to say vishavtem, that you go back home, and also leolam, that a doorman becomes a doorman forever, right? Yeah, exactly. Meaning, on the one hand, we're saying that at the Jubilee year, what was it? Yeah, that on the one hand, we're saying that at the Jubilee year, a doorman goes home. Yet we have another pasuk that says leolam, that he'll be an Eved, he'll be a doorman forever. On the one hand, we're saying he goes home at the Jubilee year. On the other hand, we're saying that he's going to be a doorman forever. So we need both of these psukim. Well, if we would only have the pasuk of that he's going to be a doorman forever, and we don't have the pasuk of saying that doormen go home at the Jubilee year, well, hava amina le'olam mamish. Well, I might think that when it says that he's a doorman forever, it literally means he's a doorman forever, even past the Jubilee year. That's why you have the pasuk to say v'shavtem, that no, even a doorman goes home at the Jubilee year. Because of Achmana v'shavtem, and if we would only have the pasuk to say that he goes home at the Jubilee year, hava amina, I might think hane mile heicha delo avad sheish. That might only be if he hasn't yet done 6 years. So meaning, he already was an Eved for 6 years. And then and then, wait, what? Yeah, you got it. This isn't hard. It's not hard. You just have to remember, you just have to keep the train of thought, but it's not hard. Exactly. So if it would only say, Vishavtem, that you go back, I might think that a doorman would go back at the Jubilee year, that applies to when he was already an Eved Ivri for 6 years. He signed on to be a doorman for longer. 2 years later, it becomes it's the Jubilee year. So in that case, they're saying that's when he goes free. But I might say that if you already worked 6 years, lo yeh sofu chomer mitchila, so let's read till the end. Sorry, it doesn't, that's why I got stuck. It doesn't read smoothly. Let's just read till the end and then we'll make sense of it. It's not hard. Again, it's not hard. So, lo yeh sofu chomer mitchila, so that when he initially became an Eved Ivri, he was an Eved Ivri for 6 years. Now he signs on for more to be a doorman. So we might have a havmina to say that when you sign on to be a doorman, you only sign on to be a doorman for 6 years, right? So meaning the havamina would be to say that, look, when the pasuk says that a doorman goes free, that's specifically talking about that he goes free if the Jubilee year arrives before he's completed 6 years as a doorman. I may have thought to say, though, that a doorman, though, once he arrives at 6 years, he goes free, just like a regular Eved Ivri after 6 years goes free. So I might think that when he signs on as a doorman, that's not going to be more stringent than when he initially became an Eved Ivri, and therefore just like a regular Eved Ivri term is for 6 years, so Eichad a doorman is a doorman for 6 years. I may have thought that. Therefore we need Le'olam to say that no. A doorman is a doorman until the next Yovel. So again, Vishavtem teaches that he goes back at the Jubilee year. Le'olam teaches that he remains a doorman until Yovel, right? That could be 40 up to 49 years, right? But comes the Jubilee year, he goes free. That was like a little bit technical, but I hope y'all got that. Okay. I'm really happy that we did that big chunk of Tesvav Mud Aleph yesterday because this daf is going slowly. It took 20 minutes, about 15-20 minutes just to do 40% of the of the Amud. So I'm happy that we did a chunk yesterday. Elaman Tana Delo Yalav Sachir Sachir. So then again, who is the Tana who does not hold the Gzeir Shava of Sachir Sachir? Right? We wanted to say just now that it was the Tana who says that by an Eved Ivri sold by Bezdin, we need a pasuk to teach us that he goes free at the Jubilee year, but we said no, whatever, not him. So Elaman Tana Delo Yalav Sachir Sachir. So again, who is the Tana who does not hold of the Gzeir Shava of Sachir Sachir? Rebbe he. It's Rabbi Yehuda Anosi. The Tanya is we learn in a brisa. Ve'imlo yigoel ba'ele. Now this is talking about be'ele. So this is talking about a yid who sells himself as an eved to a non-yid who lives among them. Right? A ger toshav, a Gentile who obeys the shiv mitzvahs b'nei Noach, and so he sells himself as an Eved Ivri to this fellow. So his family members are encouraged to redeem him, right? To buy him back. But if he is not redeemed by his family, Rabbi Omer be'ele hu nigol ve'ein nigol b'sheish. That says Rabbi that this fellow who sold himself as an Eved Ivri to a Gentile, he can only be redeemed if his family members redeem him. We'll see later on that he could redeem himself, other people could redeem him, but the important point is ve'ein nigol b'sheish, but he does not go free mimele after 6 years. Sheyachol valodinu. I may have thought to make the following logical argument: Uma mishe eino nigol be'ele nigol b'sheish. I may have thought that, a regular Eved Ivri who sold to a Yisrael, who does not, right, Be'ele is not talking about him, right, it's not talking about, right, this pasuk of the family members redeeming him is not by an Eved Ivri sold to a Yisrael. it's talking about the family members is by an Eved Ivri sold to a Gentile. So somebody who's not redeemed in this way, a regular Eved Ivri, nigul b'sheish, yet he goes free at 6 years. Zeh shenigul be'ele. So an Eved Ivri who is sold to a Gentile, that we encourage his family members to redeem him. Eino din shenigul b'sheish. I may have thought, so I may have thought that certainly this Yid who is sold to a Gentile would go free after 6 years. Tamalomer be'ele, therefore says Rebbe that no, be'ele hu nigul, that he goes free when his family redeems him. Ve'ein nigul b'sheish, he does not go free at 6 years. And if it enters your mind that Rebbe holds of the Gzeir Shava, Sachir, Amai Ka'amar, why? Amai Ka'amar Uma Mishe'eno Nigul Be'ele. Then why does Rebbe say that that a regular Eved Ivri is not redeemed by his family? Neilaf Sachir. We should make the Gzeir Shava of Sachir, because it says Sachir also by an Eved Ivri who sells himself to a Gentile, and it says Sachir, of course, by an Eved Ivri who sells himself to a Yid, right? So meaning Rebbe had just said that this concept of Be'ele, that what Rebbe had said, that when it comes to a Yid who sells himself as an Eved to a Gentile, so it says specifically there that the family members have a mitzvah to redeem him, and Rebbe had said that that's specifically by a Yid who sells himself as an Eved to a Gentile, but that does not apply to a regular Eved Ivri. Now, if Rebbe held of Sachir, well then it should apply to a regular Eved Ivri, because it says Sachir by a regular Eved Ivri as well as by a Yid who sells himself as an Eved to a Gentile. So, from the fact that Rebbe says that the relatives redeeming is a mitzvah only for a Yid who sells himself to Gentiles, but not to a Yid who is sold to another Yid, it must mean that he doesn't hold Sachir. Wow, this page requires quite a bit of detail. Amr Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Le'olam Yalif Sachir. No, you can argue that Rebbe really does hold of the Gzeir Shava of Sachir, V'shayni Acha, but it's different when it comes to the relatives. Tamikra Yigalenu, right? It says, Ododo Vendodo Yigalenu, Lazeh V'lo La'acher. That Yigalenu, him, specifically a Yid who is sold to a Gentile, but this mitzvah does not apply to a Yid sold to another Yid as an Eved Ivri, but you can argue that Rebbe really does also hold of Sachir. So I don't know then who argues. So maybe the point is Umantana de Polig Ali de Rebbe, but is that, let me think for a second. Yeah, I don't know. Are we saying that they would hold of they wouldn't hold of Sachir? I don't know. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I don't know that we actually answer who is the Tana who doesn't hold of Sachir. But anyways, Umantana de Polig Ali de Rebbe. Now, who argues with Rebbe? Right, Rebbe had said that a Yid who is sold to a Gentile as an Eved does not go free after 6 years. Now, who argues on Rebbe and says that a Yid sold as an Eved to a Gentile does go free after 6 years? Now, how can you go free after 6 years? I mean, isn't it up to the Gentile? Well, we're talking about a Gentile who observes the Shev Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, a Gentile who, as the Gemara is going to say at the end, obviously, if we can't convince him or whatever to respect the laws of the Jubilee year, okay, so then what can we do? But we're talking about a Gentile who lives among the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, and he's willing to sort of cooperate with the laws regarding the Jubilee year and stuff. So that's what we're talking about. So Mantana de Palagali de Rebbe. So who argues on Rebbe and says that a Yid sold to a Gentile would go free after 6 years? Rabbi Yossi Aglili v'Rabbi Akiva. It is Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. The Tanya is we learned in the price. Said Lo Yigoel, right? Lo Yigoel be'ele. Okay, so it says, right, the pasuk says, by a yid sold to a Gentile, that if he is not redeemed by his relatives, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer be'ele l'shichrur, that b'shar kol adam l'shibud. Right, that meaning the pasuk says, what does the pasuk say? Vim lo yigoel be'ele, that if he will not be redeemed be'ele, by his relatives, v'yotza, and who will he then be? Who is he redeemed by? By other people, right? If he wasn't redeemed by his relatives, but instead he was redeemed by other people who aren't his relatives, v'yotza b'shnas hayovel. So in that case, all right, I'm reading the pasuk, he goes free at the Jubilee year, i.e., he's an eved to the people who redeemed him until the Jubilee year. So again, right, lo yigoel be'ele, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer be'ele l'shichrur, b'shar kol adam l'shibud. That, right, lo yigoel be'ele, that if he's not redeemed by his family, well then, v'yatzu b'shnas hayovel, he will be an eved ivri until yovel. So meaning, if his family redeems him, so then he immediately goes free once he's redeemed. If somebody else who's not his family redeems him, well then that person now owns him as an Eved Ivri until the Jubilee year, and at which point he goes free. So again, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer be'ele l'shichrur, if his family redeems him, so then he goes free. B'shar kol adam, but if he's redeemed from the Gentile, from anybody else, l'shibud, he will then be an Eved Ivri to that fellow, to that Yid, until the Jubilee year. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says fakert. Rabbi Akiva Omer be'ele l'shibud, that no, if he's redeemed by his family, he is an Eved Ivri to his family until the Jubilee year. B'shar kol adam, but if anybody else were to redeem him, any other Yid redeemed him, the shichrur, he would be free immediately. My time with Rabbi Yossi Aglili, how come Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that when his family redeems him, he's free, but when other people redeem him, he's an Eved Ivri to them? On my Makra, the pasuk says, Im lo yigoel be'ele, that if he's not redeemed by his family, ele ba'acher, rather he's redeemed by a different Yid, v'yotzu b'shnas hayovel, well then he's an Eved Ivri to that other Yid, and he goes free at the Jubilee year. But if his family redeems him, he's free immediately. For Rabbi Akiva Omer, whereas Rabbi Akiva says, Im lo yigoel elo ba'ele. No, if he's specifically redeemed by his family, v'yotzu b'shnas hayovel, then he remains an Eved Ivri to them, and he goes free at the Jubilee year. But if anybody else were to redeem him, then he would go free immediately. For Rabbi Yossi Aglili responds to Rabbi Akiva, and he says, Midi elo be'ele ksiv. But it doesn't say, midi elo be'ele ksiv. It doesn't say in the pasuk, vim lo yigoel elo be'ele. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says to Rabbi Akiva, I don't understand. You added a word to the pasuk. It doesn't say vim lo yigoel elo be'ele, that if he's specifically redeemed by his family, so then he becomes an eved till the Jubilee year. It simply doesn't say that. It says im lo yigoel be'ele. If he's not redeemed by his family, then he is an Eved. If he's redeemed by somebody else, then he's an Eved. If he's redeemed by his family, says Rabbi Yossi Aglili, he goes free immediately. So the Gemara says, good point. Rabbi Akiva would not be able to explain his opinion based on that pasuk. Rather, they're arguing on the following pasuk. That the pasuk says, O dodo, O ben dodo yigalenu, zegulas krovim. That we have another pasuk that says that his uncle or his cousin, that refers to his relatives redeeming him from the Gentile. O isiga yado, or if he redeems himself, zegulas atzma, that's if he manages to redeem himself. Vinigol, zogulas achem, when it says vinigol, then that's talking about when other people redeem him. Okay, so that pasuk, right, is talking about three types of redemptions, right? His cousins redeem him, or if he redeems himself, or if other people redeem him. Okay, fine. Rabbi Yossi Aglili suffers, Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds, mikra nidras lifonov, that the pasuk, right, so now of course, if he redeems himself, he goes free, right? So now the question is, we also, right, prior to himself in the pasuk, we mentioned if his relatives redeem him, and after mentioning himself, redeeming himself in the pasuk, it mentions other people redeeming him. So Rabbi Yossi says that you expound the pasuk based on what comes before, right, based on the first part, which is when his relatives redeem him. Shtigulas krovim agulas atzmo, that connect when other people connect when his relatives redeem him to when he redeems himself. Magulas atzmo l'shichur, just like when he redeems himself, he of course goes free. Avgulas krovim l'shichur. So oichit, if his relatives redeem him, he oichit goes free. That's Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion. But if other people were to redeem him, he would be an Eved Ivri to them until the Jubilee year. Rabbi Akiva Savar, whereas Rabbi Akiva holds Mikra Nidrash La'acharav, that actually the pasuk is expounded based on the latter part. Shdi gulas acherim agulas atzmo. Connect when other people redeem him to when he redeems himself. Magulas atzmo l'shichur, just like when he redeems himself, he goes free. Avgulas acherim l'shichur. So oichit, when other people redeem him, he goes free. But if he would redeem, if his relatives would redeem him, he would be a Eved Ivri to them until the Jubilee year. But one second. Then why do I have that first pasuk of Be'ele, right? If we're learning everything out, if the machlokes between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva is about the pasuk of Ododo, Ben Dodo, etc., so then why do I need the first pasuk of Be'ele? We had initially learned out from Be'ele, right? Is it the relatives? Is it not the relatives? But then why do we need that pasuk? So Ilav Be'ele, so says the Gemara, well, if not for Be'ele, well, Hava Amina, Mikra Nidrash, Bein Lefanav, Bein La'acharav, V'akol L'shichur. If not for the pasuk of Be'ele, I would have thought that pasuk of Ododo, Ben Dodo Yigalenu, O Misher B'sarim, Mishpachto Yigalenu, O Isigu Yadav Inigal, etc. If not for the pasuk of Be'ele, I would have thought that other pasuk, we compare both the first part and the last part to the middle part, i.e. when he redeems himself, and to say that in all situations he goes free. That if his relatives redeem him, he goes free. If other people redeem him, he goes free. Just like when he redeems himself, he goes free. So therefore we need the pasuk of Be'ele in order to teach us, wait, is it just when his relatives redeem him, does he go free? Or is it just when the other people redeem him, does he go free? But if that's the case, that then ultimately we're going back, we're avoiding, as we like to say in my family, to Be'ele, then you have the same kasha about how does Rabbi Akiva understand that pasuk. It doesn't say Ela Be'ele, it says Be'ele. So Ela Bisvara Kemiflige, okay, rather, look, Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva at the end of the day are arguing based on Svara. Rabbi Yossi, right, based on logic. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Savra Mistavra Gulas Acherim L'Shibud. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, look, it makes sense to say that if other people are going to spend their money to redeem this fellow who sold himself to Gentiles, so it makes sense that they are now going to own him as an Eved Ivri. The Omrat L'Shichur, because if you say that they're going to spend money and redeem him, and he goes free, well then they're not going to redeem him, right? What's in it for them, right? They're just going to redeem him and he goes free. So no, rather says Rabbi Yossi Aglili, they redeem him and he becomes an Eved to them until the Jubilee year. So, okay, but if his family redeems him, he goes free. Rabbi Akiva says, Mistava Gulas Krovim L'Shibud, that it makes sense that Fakert, that when his family redeems him, that is when he is an Eved until the Jubilee year, to Yomrat L'Shichur, because if you say that if his family redeems him, he goes free, Kol Yoma V'Yoma Azul Mezab Nafshe, every day he's going to sell himself to a Gentile because he knows that his family is going to redeem him, and his family is going to redeem him, he's going to go free, he's going to sell himself again. Right? So therefore, says Rabbi Akiva, it makes sense that when his family redeems him, he doesn't go free, and now he's an Eved to them, and that's that until the Jubilee year. Okay. Fine. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva, right? Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that when his family redeems him, he goes free. When other people redeem him, he's an Eved to them. Rabbi Akiva says Fakert. When his family redeems him, he's an Eved. When other people redeem him, he's free. Aval Chacham, Omer, but the Chacham say, Hakol, the Shichur, that everybody is free. Right? He's free if he redeems himself. He's free if his family redeems him. He's free if other people redeem him. Man Chachamim, who's the Chachamim? Who says that he's free in all situations? It's Rebbe Dimapik Lei Lehai Be'ele Ledrasha Achrina, that he uses Be'ele to teach something else unrelated to family or other people. umikra nidrash ben lefanav ben acharav, right? And therefore the pasuk of dodo, ben dodo, etc. So all of it is connected to him redeeming himself, which is the middle case. And just like when he redeems himself, of course, he goes free. So also if his relatives redeem him, or if other people redeem him, in all cases, he goes free. What does Rebbe do with v'yotzo b'shnas hayovel? Right? Rebbe had said, v'im lo yigol be'ele, if he is not redeemed be'ele by his relatives, so Davka is redeemed by his relatives, but not by 6 years. Right? We said Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili argue and say that no, he does go free after 6 years. But if Rebbe says that he doesn't go free after 6 years, so now when it says, right, so Rebbe learns out from Lo Yigol Be'ele that Davka, right, his drush is coming from Lo Yigol Be'ele, but he doesn't learn out anything from V'yotzu b'shnas hayovel. Right, Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva were understanding that to mean, well, he becomes either a slave to other people until Yovel, or he becomes a slave to his family until Yovel. But Rebbe said that in all of those cases he goes free. So what does he learn out from B'shnas hayovel? So mibar lelich detanya, we need like the following brayso v'yotzu b'shnas hayovel, that he goes free at the Jubilee year. Be'ovid kochavim sheyeshno tachas yodcha. That's talking about so I guess in the case of when nobody redeems him and he remains in Eved, so to this Gentile, so he goes free at the Jubilee year, and that is Ba'ovid Kochavim Sheshnu Tachas Yodcha. That's talking about an Ovid Kochavim who lives among you and is willing to go along with the halachos of the Jubilee year. Maybe it's talking about Ovid Kochavim who doesn't listen, doesn't go along with the Jubilee year rules. Well, if we're talking about an Ovid Kochavim who's unwilling to respect the laws of the Jubilee year and have him go free at that point, well then what's there to talk about? So obviously, he must be talking about an Ovid Kochavim who's willing to release this fellow at the Jubilee year. The sun is coming back again, so we finished at the perfect timing. Friends, that was Abtez Vav Masechta Kiddushin. Wow, that was actually quite involved daf. It was not super simple. But so I'm really happy we did a big chunk yesterday of it. We talked about ultimately we're trying to figure out who is the Tana who does not hold of the Gzer Shava of Sachir. We tried to bring different questions, different proofs, but I don't think we actually came up with a solution. In the end, along the way, we learned about different halachos about the Eved Ivris and doormen and things like that, and a fellow who sells himself to a Gentile as an Eved and who redeems him, his relatives. Machlokas Rebbe Yossi Aglili, Rabbi Akiva, in terms of, does he go free if his family redeems him, like Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, or if other people redeem him, like Rabbi Akiva says, or if either one, like Rebbe says. So, anyways, that was Daf Tezvav, Masechta Kiddushin. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.